Greetings from Expansion from Within, Discovering Multidimensionality and the Divine Feminine, where we delve into themes of reality, consciousness, and the human experience. In the upcoming episodes, we will explore the significance of embracing the Divine Feminine and how we can enhance every facet of ourselves to reach our fullest potential. We aim to empower those who resonate with an open heart and mind to cultivate a life and a world rooted in equality, harmony, and love. I'm Darlene Grift, a medical intuitive, cosmic mediator, medium, and author. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are here with Maya Cristobal. Maya is a hybrid with human and non-human memory from age of 2. Her purpose here is to activate each person's vibrational signature that defines their multidimensional experience and their unique life purpose. She was one of the first multidimensional waves to incarnate on planet Earth to raise consciousness and to prepare for the historical change that we are now in. Maya did her master's and doctoral work in developmental psychology at the Harvard University. She has practiced as a marriage and family psychotherapist for over 40 years and is committed to helping people come to terms with who they truly are and to tell their stories. She is a quantum healer, a trauma expert using neurofeedback technology, a professional writer, and a voice for 5 interdimensional beings that she calls the observers. So let's welcome Maya Cristobal. This is our part 2 of however many we choose to do with this podcast talking
it's
about.
It's not like it's a small topic. It's a pretty sizable topic.
It's a galactic topic in lots of ways, talking about the divine masculine and feminine. And so I would ask you to start with, what do you think keeps women from embracing or integrating their divine feminine?
Well, that is I think they write books on this. Big, long, complicated books. So I'm going to just share my perspective, which is the patriarchy was not always our dominant model in society. It was created over time, and much of it was created to distribute power in a very uneven way. So one of the power shifts was to marginalize and reduce the capacity for women to have power, to keep us feeling smaller, lesser than, because they were predominantly afraid of the divine feminine power. We can go back in history and figure out when that shifted, and that's a big story, because it wasn't always that the patriarchy was our template for masculine and feminine interrelating. Mm-hmm. But then once hundreds of years goes by with beliefs of, like the church had a wonderful saying, women are to be seen and not heard. Or women, like in the Jewish religion, women are to be not seen at all. They have to sit behind a wall. They can't participate in any of the religious ceremonies. So there were hundreds and hundreds of traditions that made women segregated from the man and power and leadership and having influence, etc. And they were relegated to, you have children, you raise children, you basically tend the house, and nobody works outside the home. So when this goes on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, if not, a couple of thousand, it becomes genetically a code that lives inside our bodies. It's epigenetically transferred from one generation to the next, not only as an imprint, but it's also reinforced by what kind of household did we grow up in? What were the male-female politics in that house? How did my mom, my dad interrelate? What were the messages that reinforced that genetic memory? And so to come to now and say, hey, take a look around how well that's worked. Because look where we are. We have our toes on the precipice of destroying our planet or creating nuclear war, and it wasn't the women that predominantly did that. And so we go, let's look at this not working. So how do we make it work? Well, we have to overcome and challenge this genetic memory, which is predominantly rooted in fear of doing anything else. So how many people do you know that are women who just have this irrational fear of speaking up, using their voice, saying the truth, saying what they feel? That is a genetic memory, because what the memory is you do that and you'll be burned at the stake. You do that, you will die. You won't be married. No one will like you. You'll be marginalized. You'll be rejected. You'll be put in prison. And that is still going on. It's just different forms now.
Right.
So I think we have a biological thing to get over. I think we have the work of genetically unwinding this imprint so that we can face our fear of what does it mean to be powerful, speak the truth, be fearless, be courageous, stand up for what's right, say no to what's not right, and not feel the biological tug to go back into being small. And since, and this will be my last soapbox moment, because my background and my work is in trauma. And one of the things we know about trauma, which if you look at what trauma is a shock to the system. It could be a shock to the heart, it could be a physical shock, but it's a shock that comes from an unexpected moment. And our body remembers that as well. And so what we do is we become afraid that that trauma might repeat itself, or we avoid certain circumstances or people that remind us of that trauma.
Right.
Well, if we look at how the patriarchy has worked in thousands of years, they have basically terrorized women by the millions. So you have an entire population or gender that has trauma in their genetic memory, which is don't step over the line. You know what'll happen if you do. And that's probably why we thought the best way to do it is to go into the man's world and appropriate all the man stuff, because they're going to pat you on the back for that, right? But to buck the genetic system and say, I'm going to move past my fear. I'm going to speak up anyway. I'm going to, write that article. I'm going to say no to that alcoholic husband. I'm going to take my kids and take care of them and not be an abused woman. All of that is getting over a biological undertow that goes with 2,000 years of an agenda that has created massive amounts of fear from trauma in women. And it isn't up here, the trauma. It's the abuse of the body, just the way we've done Mother Earth. We've abused Mother Earth as well. So I believe it's a biological question, frankly. It's how do we adopt an entirely new empowered stance as the divine feminine?
Yeah, and in the in the working with timelines in my own work with groups, there is something about what you're bringing up. That I was just introduced to a man, Daniel Foor, Foor, and his website is ancestralmedicine.com. And he does these intensive, I've had a client or two that have gone to him. He does these intensive ancestral clearings.
Yep.
Of what we're talking about, the trauma that exists in your ancestors, and bringing them forward to heal them, creating portals to have cultural energy to move through the portals of places that are stuck and locations. I found it very fascinating because it's another way of timelines, like moving timelines. Right. And so that's one thing that I think's out there for people. There's so much of this trauma-based issues that we are dealing with that are genetic, and epigenetics help with that. But it's also, I look at what you do in the Evox machine. Do you want to explain a little bit about that? Like
That's a tall order. So yes, I after 40 years, after 40 years of being in the world of therapy, I've been doing 20 years using a neurofeedback process where we can map a person's voice and all the vibrational frequencies of a person speaking about a parent, a belief system, a trauma. And it locates how we hold it in our neurology. And it also helps locate what our belief systems that we assembled after those various traumas. But what it identifies as well is intergenerational, transgenerational, ancestral trauma. So I went in to do this work because through the use of vibrational frequencies and another bunch of sort of brain training modalities in the EVOX work, we unwind how we are hardwired to that trauma, to that shame of a mother, to that alcoholism of a father. We inherit all of that, and it just gets uploaded to the next generation. So I went into the EVOX work for that very reason, as you're talking, is that it's not just me, my mom and dad, and my life. It is an ancestral carrying of imprints that need to be sort of transmuted and shed and rewired with new belief systems, which is what I do, as well as work with people once we've unwired a lot of this trauma to start to create some neuroplasticity for new belief systems about the self, new sense of self-love, new sense of self-worth, in self-empowerment, etc. But my position is I need to sort of clean house first epigenetically so that those new things can be laid down and have a substantial root in us, basically.
Yeah. And, in talking to this client that had worked with Daniel, walking away from those intense places or doing the EVOX machine or, in the work that I do, there is a different vibration that happens because we don't recognize how much we hold.
Right.
Even as empaths, put aside the genetic thing, as women or men, as empaths, we take on a lot that isn't even ours because we think that we have to, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about, the time that in my divorce, what it took for, that morning, waking up, having 3 kids under 5, having breakfast. It was my first day of teaching in a clinic that I opened with my mother. And I was excited about that and a little terrified by that. And my husband at the time came downstairs and said, he ate breakfast, and I said, when are you leaving? And he said, I'm leaving now. And I said, when you coming back? And he said, I'm not. That was that. I'm not. And he walked out the door. And had I not had the mother that I had, that was, we used to call her Mighty Mouse. She was barely 5 foot, but she was a powerhouse. And had I not had that representation, that mentor, because it was really about pulling yourself together in that moment. I had to be where I was going to be in 15 minutes. And I had a class of 15. And what was I going to do with that? So I cried my eyes out for 10 minutes and then wiped them dry and moved on and did the class because I set it aside. But I can imagine, that other women don't have that. They have the women, they have the mothers, the aunts, the sisters that would buckle in some way about that. And that's what feels like the aliveness in me, is how do you get these women that feel so diminished? They don't have to be. How can we be their cheerleaders? How can we let them know that there's more to them than they even know? How do we bring that forward? What are the tools to bring that forward? And we're speaking about that now. So, what more would you say about not just how did we get here, but is there more to be said about that in the reference to being cheerleaders, in the reference to being the support for those that are wanting to step forward into this new place?
Well, I feel like you just identified one of the biggest aspects to why the problem is as big as it is that
Mhm.
very many of us didn't have a role model like your Mighty Mouse mother.
Mhm.
You had a reference for tenacity and bravery and courage and I'm here for you no matter what, and stand up and you can do this, and I believe in you, and all the things that help us create that belief in ourselves, right?
Right.
So if we all grow up with mothers who are not Mighty Mouse, I grew up with a mother in the military who wanted to be basically Hedy Lamarr from the
Mhm.
movies, and her entire life was around: is she pretty? What does her clothes look like? Is she invited to all the right places? And is she making my dad look good? And that was my entire model. Is you just are there to support the man.
Yeah.
And so it took me a bunch of years, decades, to find some models of women who, in fact, were not that and
Mm.
who didn't conform to a lot of the sociological stereotypes. And so I think one of the ways is that how are we cheerleaders for women falling in love with themselves and discovering how powerful they are, is that we have to embody it and be the model for our children, for our grandchildren, for our friends, for our groups that we lead. We need to be an active version of the very thing that we're cheerleading them on to encounter in themselves. We need the models. We need the Maya Angelou's, which was one of my big persons, And I imprinted, instead of on Hedy Lamarr with her beautiful lips and fabulous hair, I imprinted on Katharine Hepburn, who basically was the first female lead in movies to wear pants and basically shake a fist at the patriarchy in movies. And so, but I had to dig for them. And so I
Yeah.
think how we can support this process is first create collections of women, which is the way it's supposed to have been from the beginning of time.
Right.
And since the nuclear family happened, we've been segregated out and isolated from one another, is that we gather and we talk and we hold and we share and we model and we create rituals and we create the leaving
Mhm.
behind of an old model and the embracing of a new, and we become mirrors for each other's power. We reflect back to them the beauty, the power, the creativity, the love that exists in all of us that we've been very tamped down over the last 2,000 years to fully express, really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can't do it alone. Like
No,
that's the thing, for women that are out there, and I hear so many of them that are lonely.
yeah.
Lonely, it doesn't matter your age or if you have a family or whatever, because our hearts are craving
Mhm.
more of who we know ourselves to be, you know,
Right.
and it does come from that supportive place.
Mhm.
So finding, your group, finding who that is that resonates with you, that supports you, that becomes like Mighty Mouse in some way that says, I got your back, you
Mhm.
know. I think it's important. I think it's just difficult. Like you had to do a lot of researching to find women that could be role models for you. I think it's the same for women. They don't know where to start,
Yeah, I think
you
it's absolutely true. I mean, that explains why the movie Barbie was so
know?
culturally like a can opener that just
Mhm.
wrenched a lid off of something, and suddenly the men were running to the movie as well
Mhm.
because it was finally saying, and you've been abused too, men.
Right.
You've been
Yes.
thrown into a role that is a straitjacket for you too. And let's look at how we can be integrated and connected in different ways, and maybe we can be friends. And it was such a fabulously simple remedy dropped into the collective consciousness through a movie. And uh and i i know gener- i know 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 20-year-olds who've seen this movie like 5 times, and they
Mhm.
can't quite put their finger on why it's so inspiring. They just know that they're sort of osmosising something very, very important about their own growth as a woman, basically.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be, I have this image, maybe it's a fantasy, that, when there is a woman's circle, not a huge one, it could be like 5 women, right? That they really anchor in who they are and who they want to be, and they have those conversations that are deep, taking that energy out to the masculine, because you
Mhm.
will talk to them differently. You will hold
Right.
them differently. There won't be the division. There won't be the animosity. There won't be all our crap that we've picked up from the generations that said we have to fight them. We
Yeah.
have to fight them. We have to prove that we are just as big and as brave and as bold as they are.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's helping them to understand their woundedness,
Right.
because we all have it. We can't
Right.
we can't say, oh, women are wounded and men aren't, or men are really deeply wounded and women aren't. No, we are all screwed when it comes to being wounded
Yeah.
genetically, through history, all of that. I mean,
Right.
I would love for that to happen more. Put a calling out for women to please let either one of us know if they have this group
Mhm.
already, and what are
Yeah.
they doing in that
Yeah.
group.
Great. That's great. Well, your remark really quickly is that I work with a lot of military, very traumatized military special operatives who have seen many deployments into the most unthinkable military circumstances uh, in our world, and they come to work on that trauma with me, and it's an extraordinary experience for me, and helping them get in touch with feelings, getting in touch with their heart. But the thing I take away every single time from working with these very patriarchally abused men is the thing they remark on as we go is I hear this across the boards. They'll just sort of have a lot of feeling, and I'll say, well, what is it? What's the feeling that's coming up? I'm really sad, and what's the feeling coming up? And they say, I just don't think I just don't remember being seen before for who I am.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I think that's part of what we need to do is start to see the divine masculine, even in the roughest version of whomever we're dealing with as a man, and reflect back to them the best qualities in them and listen to them
Yeah.
talk about things and listen underneath that, because I think men and women are the same. We all want to be seen and heard. We all want to be understood. So that to me is that is the byproduct of the work that I have done. Is that's the thing I hear repeated. I don't know if I've ever been seen before, which is really because they had a space so they could show up, and then I was just seeing them, but they showed up. They needed a space as well to show up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we need groups like that for our husbands, our boyfriends, our fathers, our brothers. We need groups like that as well.
Yeah, we do. There was, what was it called? The Mankind Project or something. I remember, where they would take men out into the wilderness and they would
Yeah.
do their thing, but
Mhm.
that was really to open them up so that they could process through their trauma.
Right.
I don't know if that still exists, but that was out there like 20 years ago. Maybe it's,
Yeah, they have migrated a lot of these into religious contexts. So it's all about being a man of
oh,
God. There's a lot of that, but it isn't necessarily an evolved perspective, in my opinion. There is a wonderful organization in the United States called Boys to Men, and
mhm.
where they take men who are in the general, uh, you know, the 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 locale, like bankers and doctors and acupuncturists, and these men are trained, and then they bring the same number of young boys, somewhere between, I think they start at 11, 10 or 11, and go to 16 or 17. And it's all about embodying and showing a new version of the masculine, talking about feelings, trying to create emotional intelligence, and that's okay to have feelings. And then coupling it with a lot of the Mankind Project thing, which is let's get connected to the earth. Let's go on vision quests. Let's go on dream time. Let's go out and then sit by the fire and talk about how we feel and what we're mad about and have our feelings. It is a fabulous organization. It's a fabulous, so very full of integrity, and they're all over the United States. But that model we need like exponentially everywhere. We need it just to be with men and their sons,
Yeah.
men and marginalized youth, men and themselves. And I know that it's out there, but I haven't found many that are not sort of embedded in sort of religious contexts.
Yeah. And see, that's the place, we have so much static and stigma around God.
Mm-hmm.
Is he male? Is it female? So when they bring in that religious piece, it just taints it because we have all this history of what that
Right,
means.
right.
You know, bringing in spirit might be different, bringing in guidance might be different, but once they capitalize on the religion piece of it, I think it really just wounds more.
Well, it just keeps the wound from being exposed enough to heal. It just keeps it going. I mean, I read an article 6 months ago about a group. It was a religious group, and they had 2,300 men, 2,300, who all paid a bunch of money, and they were coming to learn how to be a man of God, a man of God. Now, we would like it to be a man of the divine, but it was the man of God. For 3 days, they paid a lot of money. They all came in camo gear.
Oh, wow.
They all came in hunting gear. They all came in hiking gear, and they all sat around and drank beer. And they had a tent for drinking beer, and they had a tent for cigars. And then they would sit around at night with their beer and their cigars, and they would try to talk about feelings and what about relationships, and they would bond. And the whole thing was they were wanting to bond, but what they were bonding over was cultural norms. Men
Right.
drink, or I'm surprised they didn't have a tent with big screen TVs for football, right?
Right.
So they felt that they were evolving a new connected, bonded man. And it was just a reshuffling of the stereotype we're trying to get beyond altogether. But 2,300 came.
Wow. That's a lot of male energy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of cigars too.
Cigars and beer. They used to have at Omega. I don't know if they still have it. It was called the Red Tent for women.
Oh, I know all about that. I don't think they have that still.
Yeah. That was, years ago, that was a phenomenal thing of having women of all
Yeah.
ages and cultures and everything get together. And we didn't have beer or, big TVs or anything. We kind
Yeah.
of did it differently. But I think I'd like to continue the conversation.
Great.
Do you have any idea what you'd like to talk about next that feels like it's in alignment with where we're going?
Well, I think I feel like talking about courage is a really important thing, because
Mm,
to change these norms, to change these genetic memories, to to leave the ancestry of abused and diminished women that live in our genes and in history, it is not going to be easy, because the problem is the patriarchy, as much as it doesn't work for men, keep the disparity has worked for men. The women are home taking care of the kids. They can go earn the money. They're earning the money. They're getting the praise. They have all that. So the patriarchy in a large proportion is not going to love relinquishing and equalizing that power. And we've already seen that in the
right.
last couple of years in our country. So it's going to take a lot of support, bravery, and courage to know yourself so well that you just won't take any shit anymore,
Hmm.
and let the cards fall where they may, with a relative, or with a boss, or with a husband, etc. It is not going to just, I don't think the old paradigm is just going to go quietly into the night. I
No.
think there's going to be a death that occurs, and if women embody the divine feminine, men are going to go into a crisis of meaning in a very big way, which really to me is what is a door to their own evolution as well.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to take a collective courage and a bonding of women supporting each other to say no when they mean it and know why they're saying no, and then say yes to their heart and say yes to their intuition and to their visions and their own dreams, because that's what our culture needs the most, and it's what our kids need to see happening.
Right.
And so yeah, I'd love to talk about what do we need to embody in ourselves in order to successfully transmute this old pattern and this old paradigm and knit together a more functional, coherent sense of who we are as women.
I agree. I would like to open, when whoever the listeners are, is to share. Share if there was a time in your life that you went from being more of the victim to what happened, that you rose from that. Because as you're speaking again, I had a neck injury from a person that I was involved with that put me paralyzed for 9 days. But what changed in that, without any consciousness, is that I don't allow that anymore. Like there was a part of me that just came through that, rather than arguing just in my head, if you're going to push against me, if you're going to do something like that, I have a lot to say about that. Whereas before I wouldn't talk.
Right.
Would have the internal dialogue. Oh, I'd
Right.
like to say this. It used to drive my partners crazy because they were trying to get something and they were being very aggressive with it, but I was thinking I was talking and I wasn't. And
Yeah.
so that place of, I'd like to hear from women to support the women. Like,
Right.
was there a turning point
Yeah.
in your life that you said enough? Enough.
I think that, in fact, when you asked in our last podcast, you asked a question like sort of like, what will it take? What will it take for us to revolutionize this perspective of the divine masculine and divine feminine? And I believe from forever that it seems that the organic nature of humans is we do not change because we have a good idea.
Mhm.
We change because there's a crisis of some sort that our body recognizes as the way I've been doing it before is not going to work here, and I have to move into a completely different place. And
Mhm.
it's like it's a shit or get off the pot moment. It's not like, oh, I just read a great Marianne Williamson book and I just want to be the divine feminine. Never, ever, ever happens that the mind changes the organic nature of how we move through the world unless there's a crisis. And the crisis in China, the character for crisis is two characters merge, which is danger and opportunity. There's always a danger perceived to be inside of change. And we need to hit that head on and say, well, what are those dangers that we perceive might be if I say no to my husband, or I say, screw you to my boss and walk out, or I won't put up with, harassment on the job or whatever it is. We need to know that those things are going to create opportunity for us to become different than we have been in the past. And just like you, one of my biggest changes in life had to be such a large technicolor trauma that
Mhm.
there was no way I could go back to the way that I was. It was like there was a point of no return, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of women can identify, like you, that moment where this is a point where I'm departing from who I was and I have to be this person now. And there is no going back. I have to be this person. And it's crisis is a motivational
Yeah,
biological factor.
it flips the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the one thing that
Right.
we have going for us, as much as it's trauma or a crisis.
Right. Right.
So we have a lot to talk about
Well,
still.
we sure do.
We
Yeah, it'd
have
be good at some
courage.
point. It'd be good at some point to have get people sending in some questions that we can field and maybe talk to if people have questions, and that would be interesting as well.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So, I'm leaving this with, we're going to talk about courage, or at least we're going to start with that, and maybe some tools about how to find that in ourselves. And then if anybody can express or say groups that they're involved with that really
Right.
have worked, and why they've worked, and the wins that they've had of coming out of some sort of victimization or less than, and what happened in their life and where are they with it. I would love to hear more about that engagement, because it brings the women energy together, brings the feminine together.
Right.
Thank you
I
again.
love it. As always, I love it, Darlene.
All right. Have a good one.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Listen for our next episode, Expansion from Within, Exploring the Sacred Feminine. You can reach me at soulunion.com. Again, have a wonderful day. Remember, you know more than you know.